Wyoming Territory. Summer of 1873, the sky was burning orange as the last wagon wheel snapped, and everything Lucetta Mae Morgan had ever known turned to ash and screaming. Her body lay half covered in dust near the smoking ruin of the wagon trail, her dress torn and blood drying along her ribs. The air stank of sweat, gunpowder, and the coppery tang of death. She could not move her left leg. Her chest rose in shallow, ragged breaths, the world spinning above her. She was alive, but barely. The wagon train had been en route to Helena when the attack came. Bandits, not more than a dozen, had ridden in hard and fast, no warning, no mercy. Her father was shot before he could even lift his rifle. Her mother's scream still echoed in her skull. Lucetta had tried to pull her younger brother Benjamin and baby sister Betha beneath the wagon, but someone had grabbed her hair and yanked her away. Then came the blow, the blur, the pain. She did not know what happened to her siblings after that. She had woken hours later, long after the flames died down and the buzzards started circling. The bandits were gone. So was her family. So was everyone. They had left her for dead. The sun had begun to dip low again when the sound of a horse drew near. Lucetta forced her eyes open, heart thudding with panic. Another raider. A wolf. But the shape that stepped off the horse was neither. He was tall, his black hair braided down his back, and he moved with the kind of quiet strength that made the earth seem to part for him. His face was hard with focus, but his eyes, dark, steady, and watchful, met hers with something she had not seen in hours. Kindness. He knelt without a word, his hand hovering first at her forehead, then checking the wound along her ribs. His touch was gentle, his brow furrowed. "You are not dead," he said simply, voice low and clear. Lucetta tried to speak, but her throat was dry, her tongue thick. She managed a small nod. He looked around the burned wagons, the scattered bodies, and then back to her. "There are no others left," she choked on something between a sob and a gasp. "My siblings, a boy, Benjamin, 5, and a baby girl, Betha. I do not know where they are." He was silent for a moment, then stood and scanned the horizon. "There are no signs of children. Tracks only lead west. Whoever took them is gone." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and useless. "They left me." "Many do not know how to look at death and still see life," he said, and then, without another word, he lifted her into his arms. Lucetta cried out from the sharp pain in her leg, but he held her steady. She clutched at his chest, her fingers curling into the soft leather of his shirt as the world tilted again. His heartbeat was calm beneath her hand. "I am Quillan Highcloud," he said as he placed her gently on his horse and climbed up behind her, steadying her with one arm. "My village is near. We have healers." Lucetta blinked through tears. "Why are you helping me?" His voice was quiet against her ear. "Because your spirit has not left you yet." They rode for hours, dusk falling into night. She leaned against him, too weak to do anything else, the pain in her side growing sharper with every step the horse took. Still, she did not let go of him. The Lakota village sat in a wide valley, ringed with cottonwoods and the soft sounds of water from a nearby stream. The people there looked up as they approached, but no one questioned Quillan as he carried her down and straight into a large lodge with painted hides and a warm fire already glowing inside. A woman with gray in her hair and a firm, no-nonsense gaze immediately took over. She cleaned Lucetta's wounds and set her leg, murmuring things in Lakota that Lucetta could not understand. Quillan remained nearby, sitting watchfully just outside the flap of the lodge. Lucetta drifted in and out of sleep for days. The pain never left, but neither did Quillan. He brought her water, helped her sit up, changed the wrappings on her ribs when the healer gave permission. He never stared at her, never treated her like something broken. When she woke crying from dreams of the attack, he was there, quiet and steady, handing her a cloth or just sitting near by the fire. One morning, as the sun spilled gold into the lodge, she asked, "Why do you not ask me questions?" He looked up from where he was cutting strips of dried meat. "You will speak when your heart is ready." She watched him for a moment. "My name is Lucetta Mae Morgan." He gave a small nod. "That is a strong name." "I thought I died out there," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You were close," he replied. Then he looked into her eyes, his own serious but warm. "But you did not." Her throat tightened. "My siblings, they are still out there, maybe alive." "I will help you find them," he said, no hesitation. "When you are stronger." Something shifted in her chest, a trust she had not meant to give. But it was there now, solid and growing. Over the next week, she learned to sit up without falling over. The healer taught her a few Lakota words. The children of the village brought her smoked berries and little carved animals made of willow bark. Quillan stayed close. They spoke more now. He had lost his brother in a raid 5 winters ago. He had once been away from the village for over a year, riding alone, helping those who could not help themselves. He did not say much, but every word carried weight. One evening, as fire crackled low and the stars spread like dust across the sky, Lucetta turned to him. "I do not understand you," she said. "You carried me out of death. You feed me, sit with me, give me peace. Why?" He looked at her for a long time. "Because I see you." Lucetta's breath caught. He reached out then, slowly, gently, and brushed a loose strand of her hair from her face. His fingers lingered at her cheek. "You are strong," he said. "Even with your heart broken, even with your body hurt, you are still here." Lucetta reached up and placed her hand over his. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. "And you are the first thing I have believed in since that day." They sat like that, quiet, her face in his hand, his eyes on hers. And for the first time since the attack, Lucetta felt something deeper than pain. She felt hope. Lucetta's leg held enough weight now that she could limp from the lodge to the stream's edge with the help of a cane the healer's husband had carved for her. The cane was sanded smooth, its head shaped like a hawk's wing. She hadn't asked for it, but it had been left leaning against the lodge one morning. No note, no announcement, just the quiet way this village offered care without condition. Quillan trailed a few steps behind her that day, carrying a small woven basket. He didn't offer to take her arm. He didn't need to. She liked the steadiness of him close by, without pressure or pity. At the stream, she sat carefully on a sun-warmed stone, the fabric of her dress fluttering around her ankles. The water moved slow and clear, and the cottonwoods whispered above them. He crouched beside her and began unwrapping the dried meat and boiled roots he'd brought from the cook fire. Lucetta accepted the food with a murmur of thanks, then looked out over the water. "There was an old woman on the wagon train," she said, her voice low. "She used to say the dead don't get lost. It's the living who wander." Quillan chewed a piece of meat, watching the current. She was not wrong. Lucetta glanced at him. "Do you think my siblings could still be alive?" He didn't answer immediately. "If they were taken, then they are not gone." "Not yet." She looked down at her hands. The knuckles were raw, half-healed from how tightly she'd held onto the wagon's axle. "I don't know what to do next." "You do not need to know everything now," he said. "Only the next step." Lucetta nodded, then turned her gaze to the line of hills beyond the trees. "I can't stay here forever." "No," he said, "but you can stay until your body is ready. And when you leave, you will not go alone." That made her chest ache in a way she didn't understand yet, but she didn't look away. Later that evening, she sat near the central fire, her leg propped on a folded hide. The women were dyeing fabric nearby, their hands stained with crushed roots and berries. Children chased each other barefoot between the lodges, their laughter sharp in the dusk. Quillan returned from the ridge with a small pouch slung over his shoulder. When he sat beside her, he handed her a folded piece of tanned hide. Inside were 3 small feathers: sparrow, owl, and flicker, bound together with a strip of blue cloth. Lucetta brushed her thumb over them. "What's this?" "Something to keep with you when you ride," he said. "Each bird knows different paths. The sparrow finds shelter. The owl hears what others miss. The flicker moves between trees and sky." She stared at the feathers. "You made this for me?" "Yes," she swallowed. "I don't know how to thank you. You just did." She folded the feathers back into the hide and held it close. "When I first woke in your arms, I thought I was dreaming." He looked at her, the fire casting soft light over his face. "You were not." "No," she said. "But I think I might be now." He didn't smile, but his eyes warmed. "Then let it be a dream where you live." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and distant pine. An elder began singing near the fire, a low, rhythmic melody that wrapped around the village like a blanket. Lucetta leaned against Quillan's shoulder, her head just barely touching him. He didn't move away. "I keep thinking about the last time I held Betha," she whispered. "She had jam on her chin." He didn't speak, but his hand found hers where it rested on her lap. He didn't squeeze, didn't grip, just rested there, solid and calm. Lucetta closed her eyes. For the first time since the trail, her breath came without effort. And when she opened them again, the stars had begun to appear one by one above the cottonwoods. The morning air clung with the scent of wet earth, a summer rain having passed through in the night. Lucetta stepped carefully onto the damp grass, her cane sinking slightly into the softened ground. Her leg still ached, but the bone had mended straight. Each step felt less like a trial and more like a promise. Quillan waited by the horses, brushing down a roan mare with a rhythm that matched his silence. The village behind them stirred, gently cooking fires lit, hides shaken out, smoke curling above low roofs. No one called after her, but she felt their eyes, their quiet acceptance of her next step. She stopped a few paces from him. "You said once we'd ride when I was ready." He met her gaze. "You are ready now." Lucetta exhaled, the sound catching on something deeper than breath. "I don't know where to begin. There's no trail, no names." "There is a place north of the Bighorns," he said. "Traders pass through there, some with less honor than others. If children were taken, someone there may have seen." Her fingers curled tighter around the cane. "If they were sold into something, if they've been moved farther." "Then we follow," he said simply. "As far as needed." Lucetta nodded, her throat too tight for more. Quillan turned to the mare and adjusted the saddlebag, then led her forward and offered a hand. She took it, climbing up slow, her skirts catching at the stirrup. He mounted behind her, his arms bracketing her sides, reins in one hand. She didn't lean back, but she didn't have to. She felt the shape of him behind her, solid, unshaken. They left without farewell, the path winding beneath soaked branches and gullied hills. For long stretches they didn't speak, the only sound the creak of leather and the distant calls of meadowlarks. By late afternoon, they made camp near a cold stream, the sky streaked with high clouds. Lucetta gathered kindling while Quillan laid a ring of stones. She moved slower than she liked, but her hand was steady with the flint. As they ate together by the fire, she watched the flames flicker against his face, the orange light shifting across his jaw and brow. "When you were out riding last year," she asked, "what kept you going?" He looked into the fire a moment before answering. "There was a child, a girl taken from her mother during a storm. I found her with traders near Fort Laramie. She would not speak, not even when I carried her home. But after 2 days in her village, she sat beside her mother and braided her own hair." Lucetta folded her hands over her knee. "You remember small things. They stay longer than the rest," she nodded, eyes on the fire. "I remember my brother's boots." They were too big. He used to stuff grass in the toes. Quillan didn't speak, but he shifted closer. The silence between them didn't strain, it held. Later, as darkness thickened and the moon climbed above the pines, she drew her blanket tighter. "If they're gone," she said, voice almost lost to the breeze. "If I never find them, what becomes of me then?" Quillan leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "You do not vanish. You do not wither." She turned to him, something raw flickering beneath her calm. "How do you know?" His voice was quiet but firm. "Because you're not asking what you are without them. You're asking how to carry the weight if they are lost." Lucetta looked down at her hands. The skin had healed uneven across her knuckles. "I don't know how to carry that." "You do," he said. "You just haven't yet." She watched him in the firelight, his profile drawn in amber and shadow. She didn't reach for him. She didn't need to. Instead, she said, "When this is done, when I've gone as far as I can, and there's no more trail, will you still ride beside me?" He turned to meet her eyes. "Yes." Her breath trembled once, then stilled. The fire cracked between them, the wind shifting slightly through the trees. They sat that way until the fire burned low and sleep came quiet and deep. The land changed as they moved north, low ridges rising into broken hills, cottonwoods giving way to hardy juniper and wind-scarred pines. Quillan led them off the main trail after the second day, following a game path that twisted through narrow draws and opened into a basin scattered with boulders and scrub. Lucetta adjusted her seat, eyes scanning the horizon. "You said traders pass through these parts?" "Sometimes," Quillan replied. "The ones who sell pelts and horses to the soldiers at Fort Custer. Others come from farther east. Some carry more than they admit." She watched the way his eyes moved across the terrain, always measuring, never hurried, never distracted. He didn't speak unless it mattered, and he never guessed. She found herself holding her own questions longer, weighing them before letting them breathe. At dusk, they reached a bluff where the land dropped into a valley dotted with tents and wagons. Smoke curled from lean chimneys, and voices drifted faint beneath the wind, sharp, hurried, not like the Lakota village they'd left behind. Lucetta dismounted first, her muscles stiff from the ride. "What kind of place is this?" "Trading post," Quillan said. "Temporary. Some stay a season, most move on." They tethered the horses in a stand of trees and walked down the slope. No one stopped them at the edge of the settlement, though a few faces turned. A boy darted between wagons with a sack slung over his shoulder. Two men argued near a broken cartwheel. A woman stirred a pot over a low fire, her child curled beside her under a threadbare blanket. Quillan paused near a man unloading crates from a flat-wheeled wagon. "We're looking for two children, a boy 5, a baby girl not yet walking." The man didn't look up. "Plenty of children pass through, ain't seen any that young lately." Lucetta stepped forward. "They would have come from a wagon train." "It was attacked south of the Tongue River 2 weeks ago." The man stopped, straightened, and glanced at her. "There was talk of a raid, thought nobody lived. 2 children were taken," Quillan said. The man hesitated. "There's a trapper Dutchman named Krill. He traded a pair of boots for milk and sugar 2 nights ago. Said they belonged to a boy, but the boots were too small for his feet." Lucetta's breath caught. "Where is he?" "Camped east of here, past the dry creek bed. He's got a red mule and a green tarp." "You'll know it." They left as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the grass. Quillan said nothing until they reached the rise above the creek bed. "If he has them, we take them back," Lucetta said. "We will not leave without them," he answered. They found the camp an hour later. The red mule stood hobbled beneath a twisted pine, its ears twitching. A fire crackled low, and beside it sat a man with a bullet scar across his cheek and a rifle across his knees. No children in sight. Lucetta stayed behind a boulder while Quillan approached. "You Krill." The man looked up and spit into the dirt. "Who's asking? You traded boots 2 nights ago." The man narrowed his eyes. "What's it to you? I want them back." Krill stood slowly, brushing ash from his coat. "They're mine now." "Took them fair." Lucetta stepped out from behind the rock. "You stole them from a dying family." Krill's gaze flicked to her, then back to Quillan. "She yours?" Quillan didn't answer, but his stance shifted. "Don't see what business it is of yours," Krill said. "They're just brats." "Girl, don't even talk." Lucetta moved before she thought crossed the space between them in 3 strides and struck him hard across the face. Her hand stung, but she didn't flinch. Krill staggered back, stunned. "Where are they?" she demanded. He wiped his mouth, blood smearing his chin. "In the wagon. Tied so they don't run." Quillan stepped past him without a word and opened the tarp. Lucetta climbed in behind him, heart pounding. 2 small figures huddled in the corner, a boy with wild, dirt-caked hair and a girl barely more than a bundle of limbs in fear. The boy looked up, eyes wide, breath held. Lucetta knelt. "Benjamin," he blinked. "Luce." She pulled him into her arms, her whole body shaking. "I've got you, I've got you." Betha began to cry, then thin and hoarse. Lucetta gathered her close, clinging to both of them as though they might vanish again if she let go. Quillan stepped back and waited at the wagon's edge. She turned to him, eyes wet. "They're alive." He nodded once. "Yes." They rode out before night fully claimed the hills, the children wrapped in blankets, their bodies pressed close to Lucetta's. Quillan led the way, never looking back. They made camp near a rise of stone where the wind couldn't reach. The fire was small but warm. Benjamin curled beside Lucetta, Betha tucked against her chest. Quillan sat across from her, his rifle across his knees. Lucetta looked at him through the firelight. "You brought me back to them." He met her gaze, steady and quiet. "You brought yourself." She shook her head slowly. "No. I would have died out there, or worse." "You didn't," he said. She reached across the space between them, her hand brushing his. He didn't pull away. "I want to stay," she whispered. "Not just tonight, I want to build something again." "With you." He turned his hand over beneath hers, fingers closing around hers with quiet certainty. "You already have," he said. And in the stillness between stars, with the children safe and the fire burning low, Lucetta felt the shape of a life beginning, not the one she'd planned, but the one she'd earned. Morning came soft and slow, light filtering through the sparse pine canopy above their camp. Lucetta rose early, her arm still curled protectively around Betha's small form. The baby stirred, eyes blinking against the dawn, and nestled back into warmth. Benjamin lay nearby, one hand flung over his eyes, breathing even. Lucetta stepped away quietly, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders as she crossed to where Quillan knelt beside the cold ashes of the fire, already coaxing back the embers. "You didn't sleep," she said. He added pine needles to the coals before answering. "I listened." There were coyotes. She sank down beside him, careful to keep the blanket draped loose so it didn't brush the kindling. "They didn't come close." "They never do when there's this many bodies gathered," he said, lifting his gaze to hers. "But they wait." Lucetta looked toward the horizon. The sky was pale with promise, the kind that felt earned. "We're not far from the Powder River, are we?" He gave a small nod. 2 days riding, maybe less. There's a homestead near the bend. Woman there keeps goats and makes cheese for the soldiers. She'll trade shelter for help with fencing." Lucetta turned her eyes toward the children, still curled in sleep. "They need quiet, a place to rest." Quillan's voice stayed low. "You do too," she didn't argue. Her body still bore the deep ache of healing, though she'd long since stopped calling it pain. Something had steadied in her, like a tree finally taking root after a storm. Later that day, they broke camp. Quillan tied a narrow strip of red cloth to a low branch before they left no words about it. No explanation, but Lucetta understood. It was a sign to those who might pass after. Someone had lived here and gone on whole. They rode slow to spare the children, Lucetta holding Betha in front of her with Benjamin perched behind. The boy's arms wrapped tight around her waist, his chin tucked into her back. She could feel the tension in him ease as the miles passed. At midday, they stopped in a hollow where the grass grew tall and bees moved thick among the wildflowers. Quillan lifted Benjamin down and handed him a small piece of dried apple from his saddlebag. "You ever climb trees?" he asked. Benjamin looked up at him, cautious, then gave a small nod. "See that one?" Quillan pointed to a crooked pine with low branches. "Won't take much to reach the top. Good view up there." Benjamin hesitated, glancing at Lucetta. She smiled. "Go on, I'll be right here." The boy took off at a run, and Lucetta turned to find Quillan watching her. "You knew he needed to move," she said. "He's been still too long." They sat beneath the shade of the tree while Benjamin climbed and Betha crawled among the clover, her fingers grasping at petals. Lucetta turned to him after a long silence. "I want to build something that doesn't vanish. You will. With you," she added, voice low. "Not just beside me, part of it." Quillan didn't look surprised. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I've been waiting for you to say that." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I didn't know if it was fair to ask." He turned to face her fully then, close enough that she could see the faint line of a scar at the base of his throat. "You've never asked for anything you didn't earn." That night, they camped near the river bend, the sound of water threading through the trees. Quillan set a line with a carved bone hook, and within an hour had pulled 3 fish from the current. Benjamin helped gut them, his small hands clumsy but eager. Lucetta watched from near the fire, Betha sleeping in her lap. She'd never seen her brother so still, so focused. Quillan handed him a flat stick. "Hold it through the middle like this. Turn it slow." The boy obeyed, eyes shining with pride. Later, after the children had fallen asleep bundled close together beneath the firs, Lucetta stepped into the quiet beyond the firelight where Quillan stood near the horses. She touched his arm. "I've never known a man who listened the way you do." He looked at her, the moonlight silvering his features. "I never had reason to before you." She reached for his face, her fingers tracing lightly along his jaw. "You steady me," she said. "Even when I don't know I need it." He leaned into her touch, his hands resting at her waist. "You lit a fire in me," he murmured, "one that doesn't burn down." She rose on her toes and kissed him, slow and certain, without fear. His arms pulled her close and the world fell quiet around them. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. They reached the homestead 2 days later, a low cabin nestled against the hill, smoke curling from the chimney. The woman there, a widow named Miriam, welcomed them with cautious eyes and a rifle leaning near the door. She softened when she saw the children. "I've got room in the shed for sleeping," she said. "It's dry and warm enough." Lucetta looked to Quillan. "We'll mend your fence in return." Miriam nodded. "That'd suit." They stayed 3 weeks. Quillan replaced the east gate, and Benjamin helped carry nails. Lucetta churned goat milk into soft cheese and taught Miriam how to stitch tighter seams into her winter skirts. The children grew stronger. Betha learned to pull herself upright, and Benjamin laughed more often. When the time came to leave, Miriam pressed a small bag of dried herbs into Lucetta's hand. "For coughs," she said, "or hard nights." Lucetta hugged her, and they rode out with the sun behind them. They found land west of the river, tucked between 2 ridges where the wind didn't cut so deep. Quillan built the cabin from pine and stone, his hands knowing. Lucetta cleared ground for vegetables and dried herbs on a line behind the door. A neighbor traded them chickens for help birthing a calf. They married in late autumn, with wild rose hips strung across the porch and Benjamin standing beside Quillan, solemn and proud. That night, after the children were tucked into their shared bed, Lucetta stood at the cabin door and watched the stars rise above the ridge. Quillan stepped behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting at her shoulder. She leaned into him. "This is what I thought I'd never have." He kissed the edge of her jaw. "This is what we made." She turned in his arms and looked up at him. "I love you." He didn't speak, just drew her close and held her there, the night quiet around them, and in the years that followed, their life settled deep into the land. The children grew. More laughter filled the walls. Each season brought its trials, but they met each one side by side. Lucetta never forgot what she lost, but it no longer hollowed her. It shaped the depth of what she built, and every night, with Quillan's hand in hers and warmth at her back, she knew without doubt that she had found her home,